am Devon Francis. I'm a partner and senior consultant with Fiducient. I've been in the investment industry for just over 20 years, but I have been an avid reader for much longer than that. I'm almost 44, so I would say it's safe to say I've been a bookworm for about 40 years. So I can very distinctly remember about when I was 9 years old, going out to visit my cousins in California for about 3 weeks over the summer. And the idea behind this trip was to kind of bring me out of my shell a little bit, have me take tennis lessons, make some new friends, that social portfolio, enjoy the California sunshine. And that plan didn't exactly come to fruition. My aunt and uncle had a hammock in their backyard, and I spent pretty much the entire 3-week period curled up in the hammock reading book after book. At the time, my favorite book was called Jelly Belly. It was about a young boy who gets sent away to a weight loss camp. Pretty sure that wouldn't fly in today's society. So I think I actually read that book 3 times over the course of that 3-week period at my cousin's house. And at one point, they actually hid it from me so that I would leave the hammock and come and play with them. Fast forward about 10 years, those same cousins came to visit my family in Connecticut at Christmas time. And after Christmas, we drove up to Vermont to go skiing for a couple days. So the whole car ride there, I had my nose in a book. This time it was Memoirs of a Geisha. And when we arrived at the cabin, I had about 20 pages left, and I just could not wait to finish it. So everyone's unloading the car, and lo and behold, I go to get my book, and it's missing. Those same cousins had hidden my book again to try to force me to actually engage with other human beings. So fast forward another 20, 25 years, and not much has changed. My favorite week of every year is my family's annual beach vacation, where I basically have unlimited time to read. I think my record is 9 books in 1 week at the beach. My husband and my 2 kids know, don't bother me when I'm reading unless it's for a really good reason. So today I'm going to share with you a top 5 list of sorts, but I have trouble narrowing things down, so it's not a true top 5. And as I mentioned, it won't include any sort of educational information relevant to this conference. So if you haven't already taken out your phone or your laptop to start checking emails, that's fine. Go ahead, I won't be offended. So here goes. All right, I have 2 contenders for best book I've read in 2023. The first is called The Measure by Nikki Erlich. And this book is based on the premise that one day every adult in the world receives a box with their name on it and a string inside. And the length of the string corresponds to the length of their life. So it's basically a big thought experiment. If you could know how long you have to live, would you want to know? And if you did have that information, how might it impact your behaviors? Would you take fewer risks? Would you take more risks? And of course, in the book, you have the worst of human nature shining through. You have people exploiting others based on the length of their strings and a whole lot of societal discord. The book very closely follows 8 individuals and the impact that receiving their boxes has on themselves, their relationships, so on and so forth. This was a really great book club book because it sparked a ton of discussion. The number 2 contender for Best Book of 2023, and if I'm being honest, I think it wins by a nose. It also was the 2023 Pulitzer Prize winner in fiction, so I'm not the only one who loves this book, is Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver. So this is a modern-day retelling of David Copperfield, which I'm a little bit embarrassed to admit I haven't actually read, but I do know the premise of it, and it does follow pretty closely. This book is set in Appalachia, and it follows the life from birth to early adulthood of Demon Copperhead. It tackles a lot of really heavy issues. Addiction, both Demon and his mother's addiction, abuse, poverty, the foster care system, the opioid epidemic. It's definitely not a feel-good book. It is heartbreaking, it's depressing. It can leave the reader feeling very helpless at times. But ultimately, it's about the resilience of the human spirit. And I will say it is fantastically researched and very well written. So while we're on the topic of depressing books, I'll move on to number 3, and it's a tie for the most depressing and bleak memoir. And the tie goes to The Glass Castle by Jeanette Walls and Educated by Tara Westover. So although these are nonfiction books, and I tend to gravitate towards fiction, they do read like novels, and both of them deal with dysfunctional families that, for one reason or another, have decided not to adhere to traditional societal norms, and the impact that that decision has on the children of those families as they go out and try to navigate the world. And from the reader's perspective, it can look very much like parental abuse, but from the perspective of the parents themselves, they think they're doing right by their children. Again, incredibly heartbreaking, very upsetting, but ultimately it does speak to the resilience of the human soul. Number 4 is probably the book that I have recommended to the most people. It's 11/22/63 by Stephen King. It's a not very Stephen King-like Stephen King book. There is a little bit of gore, but it's more like historical fiction with a sci-fi twist. So the premise of this book is that a modern-day man finds a portal to the past, and he goes back to try to stop the JFK assassination. So the title of the book is the date of JFK's assassination. So as you can imagine, things don't go as planned on attempt 1, so he tries again, and you have the butterfly effect coming into play. And it's also a really beautiful love story. I am an unabashed Stephen King fan. I'm not embarrassed to admit it. One of the things that I like about his work is that he leaves little Easter eggs in his books about former works. So those are kind of fun to uncover. I will warn you that this is really long. It's about 1,000 pages, but it's worth every page. It's a quick read, despite the length. As I mentioned, I do love Stephen King. I love almost everything that he's written, but 2 honorable mentions, if I can share those, are The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon and The Stand. All right, and now we're at number 5. These are the books that I quote most frequently as my most favorite, but I do always include them as a group. So I think of them as the dystopian trifecta. You have 1984 by George Orwell, Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, and The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. So I first read 1984 in my 10th grade English class. Mrs. Kenny was my teacher. It was assigned to the class. This was my first foray into this realm of dystopian fiction, which I absolutely love. It was new to me at the time. I just devoured that book and absolutely loved it. So through the course of her lectures, Mrs. Kenny mentioned A Brave New World as another example of dystopian fiction. So I went ahead and read that. And then when I got into my junior year, my teacher, Mr. Kotak, said that we'd be reading Brave New World. So because I was a nerd who never left a book unread or an extra assignment incomplete, I told him that I had already read it, and I asked if he had any other recommendations, and he recommended The Handmaid's Tale. So all 3 of these books paint an equally chilling but very different picture of what a society might look like if we were to lose our individual freedoms. Again, I do love this genre. 2 other books that I'd like to mention that I loved in this space are Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury and Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. So there you have it. That's my top 5 list. It's really a top 8 list if you count up the titles, and then if you factor in the honorable mentions, it's a top 12 list. But I do always have a running list of books that I want to read. Right now, that list is 108 books and growing. So Sabrina, if you'd like to give me a year-long sabbatical, I might be able to catch up, but I don't think so. But I do love knowing that I always have something to look forward to. It's that little sense of anticipation that something new is on the horizon. So there is a British author, her name is Jeanette Winterson, and I think she said it best. She said, "Books and doors are the same thing. You open them and you go through into another world." Thank you, and I'd like to welcome my colleague, Guadalupe Gomez. Thanks.